Hello chess friends and welcome to Art of Chess channel and welcome back to our Catalan opening studies. So in these studies we have seen some great opening lines and great variations of this beautiful and sharp tactical opening, and today we're continuing with a different approach in the Catalan opening. Today we're analyzing the so-called open defense of the Catalan opening. The open defense is a little bit different so far. We have analyzed the closed defense, the close variations of the Catalan opening in our playlist so far. Today with a different approach, today we're analyzing the early d takes c4 move by black, which of course creates immediately an open battle in the center of the board. The position is exploding in an early stage of the game, so it becomes really a sharp tactical battle in an early stage of the game. So it's, I think, an opening line more for a tactical player than a positional player. I myself like to go into the closed Catalan setups, but of course I'm not a great tactician. Maybe if you're a great tactical player, if you feel comfortable in tactical battles, then choose to play the open Catalan in an early stage of the game. So let's see now what's all about, how to reach the open Catalan position. And the first game that we'll analyze in this open Catalan battle is a beautiful and sharp tactical game played by Jon Ludvig Hammer and Magnus Carlsen. They're good friends in real life, but sometimes also friends have to meet in a tournament. So in my opinion, this game that you see now with the black pieces that Magnus Carlsen played is a great example how to really play the Catalan opening with the black pieces correctly in the open defense. So pay good attention. Magnus applied here many important strategic but also tactical concepts that you can use in your home preparation. So d4 was Jon Ludvig Hammer's first move, knight to f6, after move c4 e6. Now comes knight to f3, the counter in Nimzo or anti-Nimzo Indian setup. If you play knight to c3, then probably black goes into the Nimzo Indian with the move bishop to b4, or goes into the normal structures of the Queen's Gambit client with the move d5. So now after move knight to f3, we've hit the pawn to d5 anyway, and now comes the beautiful Catalan move g3 with the preparation to play bishop to g2, and now continuing simply the pressure on the list long diagonal. So this is position that we have analyzed now many times in our videos, but today with a different approach. In our previous analysis, we have seen this bishop to b4 check lines with this ideas, bishop to d2, and now after bishop to e7, bishop to g2, we have now the closed Catalan setup with the move c6. We have analyzed then the continuations b6, bishop to a6, and similar stuff. So all of these lines we have analyzed before, so please also check out our Catalan opening study so far. But today, after move g3, we are studying a different approach. We don't want to go anymore into the closed systems. Today, we are going into immediately tactical battles with the move d takes c4. You see now, the game becomes already quite spectacular, because white continues the normal development with the move bishop to g2, has now a powerful attack on this diagonal with the move d takes c4. Actually, black allowed here even white to take over now fully on this long diagonal, and now in a really, I don't know, if white wants to get anything out of this, white, the whole concept is basically around getting the pawn back on c4. So white is trying to get the pawn back and also advance the pawn somehow to e4. That's the most important strategic goal. It's of course sometimes working, it's of course sometimes not working, but in an optimal world, white will recapture the pawn on c4 and will advance the pawn to e4, will have a powerful central control with the pawns of course on the e and d file, and with the support of the bishop is trying to create madness on this long diagonal. That's the strategic goal. But after d takes c4, in my opinion, there is also a quite annoying approach of blacks to handle the Catalan opening, and you see now how Magnus is playing really in a beautiful way here, the Catalan opening with the black pieces. So now Magnus goes into a line that's, in my opinion, the best line against this approach of whites. Bishop to b4, this early check line, is causing now already many positional problems in white's position. Why is it so? This move bishop to b4 is slowing down the whole progress of white development on the queen side. You can of course play knight to d2 or something, or bishop to d2. After knight to d2 we'll simply castle. We can also then afterwards try something like the move b5. But now after move bishop to d2, now comes the tricky part. My recommendation here also, like Magnus Carlsen played here, is to play the move a5, because if now bishop to b4 happens, we can simply recapture. We have now two connected pawns on the fourth rank. And the most important thing here to notice is that we have opened the A file. And don't worry so much. Of course, white will get his pawn back on c4. It's not the problem. It doesn't make even sense to somehow even try to protect it. It's not the point about that. But we should play normal development, and we should play aggressively in the center of the board with the move c5. If your opponent goes for the pawn, now go with the move c5, c5, c5. If e3 happens, then of course we can always create at least an isolated pawn with c takes d4, e takes d4. At least we have provoked one structural weakness in white's position. So after move c5, your opponent could maybe try d takes c5, and there are many games in the database with a great success here by black. Queen to d1, king takes d1, and now knight to d7 is a beautiful approach, because if your opponent tries now the move c6, we pick up simply the knight. Your opponent can maybe try this one, c takes b7, but now after bishop to b7, bishop takes b7, we play first rook to a7, and look at this now. We're getting the a file attack. Your opponent drops back. We play king to e7 is here even a possibility, because the position is not so dangerous anymore, so the king in the center is perfectly fine. Here we'll get an attack on the d file. Knight to g4 is going to happen. If the knight moves b3, c3 are possibilities. In some lines maybe we can play knight to d5, doubling up rooks on the a file. So many opportunities come to my mind, but only good opportunities here, I think, for black. The engine gives here even a +3 evaluation in black's favor. Really wild stuff. So you see, the whole idea to take here on b4, in my opinion, is not so good because of this flexibility of the pawns here on the queen side. So after move bishop to d2 and a5, your opponent will probably many times try to move queen to c2, and that's also the continuation that Jon Ludvig Hammer played here in his game. Now Magnus simply took, and now we have reached already a positional problem in white's position. For instance, if you play here knight from f to d2, then we simply pick up the pawn on d4. Nothing wrong with that. We can trade it off, and still we're continuing the game with an extra pawn. Probably white will take your pawn on c4, but still we have a 3 versus 2 pawn majority here on the queen side. Of course, the same thing happens after knight from b to d2. Of course, you cannot take out now the pawn on d4, but it's a different story. Now we can support the pawn on c4 with the move b5. If knight to e5 happens, then we can lock now the whole diagonal with the move knight to d5, and it's a common defensive method against this bishop on g2. If your opponent wants to make further progress, now we can step back, and still we have a great protection. We can compete maybe on this file with the move bishop to b7. So in my opinion, nothing gained here so far for white. So you see, after move bishop to d2, now white continues. That's why with the move queen to d2, but now the pawn on c4 is not protected. So now we continue with the move c6, threatening the move b5. This is a huge positional threat, so that's why white has to undermine this threat with this prophylactic idea with the move a4, blocking out the potential b5 move. So we're still following this beautiful game between Jon Ludvig Hammer and Magnus Carlsen, but this move a4 is doing something else. It creates now a new weakness on b4. Again, I'm pointing out, you will probably lose your pawn on c4, but at least we did something. At least we provoked white to be slow here on the queen side, and we provoked white to create new weaknesses in the position. Now Magnus goes with knight to e4. This is a very important move. After queen to c2, we retreat with the knight. Look at this, knight to d6 protects the pawn on c4. Again, for a while, again you will lose it, but white will lose extra time to take the pawn back. After knight to d2, we have now this one, knight to a6. Your opponent is taking now. We play knight to b4, knight takes d6, and now queen to d6. And that's a position here that I think is perfectly fine here for black. Although we have problems a little bit here with our light square bishop, but after move queen to d2, kingside castling, and kingside castling, we can use now the d file attack here. It's perfectly fine. And after rook to d1, now b6 and bishop to a6. So great play here by Magnus Carlsen. Look at this. He will eventually include all of the pieces into the game. The knight is very powerful here. The rook will come on the c file. So in my opinion, it's a decent setup. It's a good setup, and black is already equalized the game. So in my opinion, this is a great approach against the Catalan opening, going into this open battle with this early bishop to b4 check moves. Good setup. Here I see only good games for black, many drawing games, many winning games by black. So that's the position that you want to get with the black pieces. So in my opinion, really line worth to study at home. So now Jon Ludvig Hammer plays the move queen to c3. Look at this, bishop to a6. Magnus has now the perfect setup. Knight very active on b4. Queen centralized on d6, aiming on both sides of the board. We have a pawn majority on the queen side. So if this game reaches maybe the fully endgame, we can maybe advance some pawns on the queen side, maybe create a passer on the queen side. The rooks are connected, so we have also finished our development. The rooks can be useful on the c and b file. So again, I'm pointing out really good setup here for black. So rook to d2, rook from a to c8, rook from a to d1, queen to e7. Now Jon Ludvig Hammer tried an attack here on the king side, but Magnus played a brilliant move that simplifies the game. Now he plays now c5, opening the position, because after d takes c5 we have first rook to d5. You cannot take, of course, here c takes b6 because the queen is hanging. Now we have rook to d5, knight to d5 hits the queen, and after queen to e5, queen to c5. And look at this, Magnus, even in some great tactical way, improved the pieces a little bit, shuffled them all over the board, but now the knight on b4 is even more active now on d5. So really great strategic play here by Magnus Carlsen. We have bishop to h3, threatening, of course, bishop takes e6. So after queen to e6 you could lose then the rook here, because if you play something, I don't know, like h6, look at this is the way to go. Bishop to e6, f takes e6, queen to e6. We can also take out the knight. The bishop is so far protecting the rook, but it's a position that I really would not love to play here anymore from white's perspective. So from black's perspective, pardon me. So after move bishop to h3, that's why Magnus protected here the pawn with the move rook to e8. We have knight to d4. Now Jon Ludvig Hammer is trying to include also his pieces into the game somehow, getting new squares for his pieces. We have king to f8. We have bishop to f1, protecting now the weak pawn on a2. And now we have rook to c8, and here Jon Ludvig Hammer makes finally his first mistake in the game so far. It was, I think, an equal game with really great opportunities for both sides. But from this point on, the game becomes, I think, a one-way ticket in black's favor. Here, Jon Ludvig Hammer makes a strategic mistake, goes with the move knight to b5, but this is not working because Magnus immediately took the bishop for knight here, because after a takes b5, look at this pawn on b5 becomes a weakness. It's a weak pawn. The pawn on b2 is also a weak pawn, and the most important thing is here that the bishop on f1 is suddenly stuck to the defense of just one pawn through the whole game. So the pawn is on a light square, so you're just protecting it. So the knight in the center of the board is much better. So great mistake here by Jon Ludvig Hammer. From this point on, I think Magnus is taking over. Magnus plays now knight to f6, wants to simplify the game, trading off the queens. Jon Ludvig Hammer plays queen to d6. We have king to e8. Magnus is noticing that this game could reach the fully endgame stage, so that's why the king is supposed to be closer to the center of the board. Really good endgame move here by Magnus. We have queen to d3. Now we have queen to d5, queen takes d5, and now Magnus plays e takes d5, locking basically out here the d file. Magnus is now trying to get the rook on the second rank and grab many of these pawns that are here. Also, then rook to c5 is an opportunity, maybe attack the weak d5 pawn. Now Jon Ludvig Hammer makes another mistake in this game. He plays e4. It seems so that this could be working because of some tactics that maybe Jon Ludvig calculated, but this was wrong. Magnus played now the move rook to c2. Although this wasn't also maybe the best continuation of Magnus, he should have simply gone with this idea, d takes e4. Probably Magnus was annoyed by this possibility of rook to d6, but still after knight to d7 you can protect the position for a while, because after bishop to h3, first you deliver a check. After king to g2, knight to c5, okay, you will lose this pawn, but now after move rook to c2. This would be a devastating game for white. e3 would be a huge tactical threat. Also rook takes b2, then rook takes b5 is also weak here. So a4, a3, a2, we can push the pawn further. So Magnus maybe didn't calculate also the position in the best way. He didn't want to complicate things, I think, here. So that's why he played first rook to c2, allowed Jon Ludvig Hammer to play the move e5, but now after move knight to e4, rook takes d5, Magnus took now finally the pawn on b2, which is also perfectly fine. Still the pawn on f2 is hanging. We have rook to d4, rook to b4, again another beautiful move here by Magnus. If you trade it off, then of course this pawn is rolling. In the game, rook to d1, Magnus pushed the pawn further, bishop to g2, knight to c3, bishop to c6 check, doesn't matter, again a new check, but the king has enough spaces to escape. We have rook to a7, and after king to e5. In this position here, Jon Ludvig Hammer even resigned. For instance, you take here rook to f7, we simply push the pawn further. If you try rook to a7 again, then we simply push the pawn further to a2, or we can play rook to a4, immediately trading off the rook, so the game would be over here for white for sure. So really amazing positional game, I think, by Magnus Carlsen. Let's go back to this bishop to b4 check line. So as I said, we played d takes c4, bishop to b4, after bishop to d2, a5, and there is already one game that I've analyzed so far in our Catalan opening studies played by Stockfish in this particular line. Please check it out. Combined with this game, it could be maybe a really good preparation for you in the Open Catalan. Queen to c2, attacking the pawn, but now we take. He has to take with the queen. We have seen the problems after knight to d2 and knight from f to d2. Queen to d2, we support. We're trying to play the move b5. He prevents it. Now we play knight to e4, kicking away the queen, knight to d6, protecting, and now we go for the b4 square. In my opinion, solid setup here for black for sure. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the study. We will continue now with the open defense of the Catalan opening, because there are so many beautiful ideas, because you don't have to necessarily always play the same line. Sometimes you go maybe for the bishop to b4 check line, maybe then afterwards you can go into c6 b5 methods, maybe a6 b5 methods. So there are many cool approaches that you can do. Everything is perfectly fine, I think, for white and from black. Many games are there that are won by white, many games are there that are won by black. So the Catalan opening is really a double-edged opening that's really worth the study. So you see, it's played very often in top GM level. In my opinion, really one of the most beautiful openings of all time. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the study. If you want to see more about the Catalan opening and more about the Open Catalan, please check out our playlist so far. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos and what to say. Chess is the best, of course.